Hi there, it's Sarah of Get Weaving. I'm calling this video Help, What Can I Do When My Weaving Hasn't Quite Turned Out As I Planned. There's normally something you can do, there's a way of rescuing it. It's happened to all of us. And rather than just abandoning it, it's quite nice to find a solution. Now, perhaps the only time you can't do that is if your fabric has come up too heavy or too stiff for the project that you had. There's not much you can do to change that. So sometimes it's just better to put it away until you have a more suitable project. But for this one that I'm doing, the fabric was fine. It was just too narrow. So I'm going to show you how I rescued it. This project started from this pattern here, which is T002. The warp runs the usual way, up and down, but I wanted to make a short version on my Ashford 12-inch knitter's loom. This was my project sheet. So it's the same dimensions. Well, it's slightly shorter, but it's the same width, same neckline, and it has a seam running across the centre. Now this was from a colour blending workshop that I did, and I thought, I wonder if I can make a version on my 12-inch loom. So I threaded up the whole width, and it has a wool warp which runs horizontally and a hand spun weft. So the stripes are running up and down, but I didn't want them to meet. And the fabric hardly shrank when it was washed. So it was set up, I guess, 11.5 inches wide on the loom, and it came off 10.5 inches wide. So I thought, I'd like to make a cotton one. Now, this is where the problem started. I didn't make a sample. I thought I'll do same dimensions, same warp length and width, whole width of the 12-inch loom. Fine. So again, the warp is cotton, runs horizontally. The weft is two different types of cotton ribbon yarn or cotton tape yarn. And I wove it really quite quickly on the loom because it grows quite fast. Did my project sheet, washed it, and instead of coming up 10.5 inches wide, it was 9 inches wide. Oops. So what can I do to rescue this? 2 lots of 9 inches would just be too short on me. So I decided that wasn't going to do at all. So the next thing I do, as usual, is to get bits of paper out and try and figure out how I'm going to make my fabric wider. Instead of being 10.5 inches wide, so I'd get 2 lengths, it was going to be to about here. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do? So this is what I start doing usually. Sketches like this. I've got to add something to this fabric to make it the width that I want. So I thought of adding linen, perhaps at the top and the bottom, or turning it round the traditional way and putting some linen in the centre like this one. Or this is my next sheet. So I've got one long strip. I could add a piece of fabric all the way along, cut it in half, and then where would it go? So I tried all these things. I didn't like any of them. The linen is much lighter in weight than the hand woven fabric. Unless I'd got something that was a very similar weight, I decided it would just hang really weirdly. So at that point I stopped. Because I had enough length, it hadn't shrunk much in the length, I decided I could afford to cut this into 5 pieces. So, sorry it's a bit scruffy. This is my final design. So I've got a top front layer and a bottom front layer, and then an extra half a width, which is fringed. Sorry, this is my normal way of working. I'll tidy it up later. So I cut my fabric into 5 equal lengths of 24 inches. And then one of them I cut in half along the length. So I had 2 pieces that were 4.5 inches wide. If I stand up, that's that bottom bit there. So this bit is 9 inches. This bit here is 9 inches. This bit here is 4.5 inches, and you can see it's been fringed. So once I'd cut it into the 5 lengths, I took 4 of them. So that's an upper and a lower front, upper and a lower back. And as usual, put the iron-on woven interfacing on the raw edges. And then you can either overlock it or zigzag it, whichever suits you. And then I had to find a way of joining these pieces together. I tried lace, I tried different ribbons, tried all sorts of things. In the end, this was the one I chose because it wasn't too shouty, if that makes sense. So once the pieces are all safe and sealed, it was how to join them. So what I did was actually pinned the ribbon to one edge and stitched it, and then pinned this other side of the ribbon to the lower edge and stitched it. Now it's worth practicing on a spare piece. I tried a zigzag stitch and I tried a straight stitch, and I ended up using a straight stitch, which was slightly longer, and I didn't want it to show up too much. I'm pleased with it. I think it works just fine. So the upper and lower front and the upper and lower back are put together, but I haven't cut the neckline yet. Then the next thing is to cut that last remaining piece in half along the length. So it's 9 inches wide by 24 inches long. It's cut in half, and that is then the lower sections for the front and the back. So you can see this is the 9 inches, this is 4.5, front and the back. What I did was stitch 2 inches from the cut edge, just a long line of straight stitching, and then fringe back to it. And then once you've done your fringing, then that is when you put your iron-on woven interfacing on the cut ends to seal them. If you do it before you fringe it, you'll find you can't fringe those edges. Fringe the ends, sorry. Now the original pattern, this is the layout. So there's a centre front and a centre back seam, but I don't need that with this. I don't want centre front and centre seams. So when I cut this out, I folded the seam allowance on the centre front and the centre back away. Because I'm cutting it the other way round, if you like, it's being cut that way round, because the seam is coming across the middle. I'll put photographs in because I know this sounds a bit peculiar. I actually folded the fabric in half, put the pattern on the top. I usually use weights, and then I cut one layer, and then I cut the second layer. Just to be on the safe side, I did the back first and then I did the front. Cut the neckline out so the front is slightly lower, but the rest is the same as the pattern. So if you have this pattern T002, you can use it if you don't mind turning your pattern sideways. Once the necklines are cut, same as usual, iron on woven interfacing on the cut edges, and you can stay stitch it as well if you like, overlock or zigzag just to hold it in place. And then it's stitching the shoulders together. There has been a little bit of shaping in the shoulders, and then binding the neck following the same instructions that are in here. And this pattern also has on one page how to make your own bias tape, which I really like. This one is a bought one. It just happened to be roughly the same colour as this ribbon. So this is a flat ribbon and this is bias tape for the neckline. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, so I might have made it sound a bit too simplistic, but if you have something that already fits you, work with the same dimensions. At least then you know it's going to feel comfortable. That's the main thing. And then what I'm going to do after this is show you some of the other options from some of our past projects, from our first book, and solutions that we're still coming up with now. So some of the earlier things, joining two fabrics together. So you can use ribbon or lace or an inkle band or braid. Or if you find that you haven't woven enough fabric and you don't want to set your loom up again, how about adding knitted sleeves or even sleeves from a fleece? These were Elizabeth's from 1986. Or if you can crochet, you could crochet your pieces together. Again, this was from Simply Woven. The pieces were 9 inches wide. The lady who made it was very accomplished at all sorts of different crafts, and it was her idea to crochet the pieces together and make a feature of the seams rather than trying to hide them. I think it looks lovely. Now this is probably one of my earliest attempts. I've shown you this before, my pink and blue top. The weaving is cotton and chenille, and I was quite worried then about cutting a neckline because the chenille just frayed so quickly. That's long before I knew anything about overlockers or woven interfacing or anything. So I probably just stitched it, but basically because all the awkward bits are purchased fabric, it was cotton. The weaving is just straight bits. So that was a really early top, and then finished off with a rigid heddle band at the bottom. One of the patterns that I've used a lot is this one, DR001. So there's a dress version and there are several tops, and inside the pattern I've put in an extra sheet showing how to make the short versions. So there are panelled versions basically. So the centre panel is woven and the side panels are fabric. The original one, this one, was all Shetland. So it's a Shetland and silk warp and hand spun Shetland weft. But it's really simple, and again, that was woven on my 12-inch knitter's loom. And then this one is dress DR005, which is this one here. So the original version had organic cotton for the weaving for the body and denim sleeves and lower band. And then Elizabeth has made a lovely version with a woven body and gingham sleeves, works really well. And then I've made a top. So the body and the sleeves are weaving and the lower band and the pocket are linen. And then this is SK002, and this version here, the godes are made from cotton. I often buy fat quarters because that's enough to do quite a lot. And then they're cut like this. So again, there's very little waste. It just means that you don't have to weave quite so much fabric. And I quite like the contrast anyway. Elizabeth wears straight skirts, but my shape doesn't really go for that. So I needed to put the godes in. And then this one here, this is T008. This version here, is a silk top, and then the peplum is gathered cotton. Originally, this piece of fabric, I made quite a long piece to make a pinafore dress. And then I changed my mind, so I made a pair of trousers instead. And there wasn't really enough left for the top. It would have been far too short. So the peplum, I think, is a bit of Liberty print, just enough to make that little frill at the bottom. Sorry, got turned around. Then Elizabeth is very clever. She's always making things up. So these are two of her tops. She has done half fabric, half weaving. Why not? Now, way back in the early days, I had a 4-shaft loom and I made a sample, and it was originally just a piece of fabric, and I thought, oh, I could use this. So I made a top. So again, the center panel and the pockets are weaving and the edges are linen. And we've used that idea quite a lot, where you've got one central panel and then you have to add something to the sides to make it go a bit further. So this one, the next one is from our book. So this is from Get Weaving, our latest book. So this is a linen and cotton top. So the center panel is woven and the side panels and sleeves are linen. And we show how to add your weaving and your linen together, and then it's actually folded in half and cut, because again, there's no center seam with this. So that works really well. So this is something that's happened to all of us. Washed your fabric, it's not wide enough. This is my friend Jill. She has made top T001. She's made it loads of times, but unfortunately this time, when she put the fabric on, the warp on the loom, I think she forgot to add the 10% for the extra width. So when the fabric was washed, it was too narrow for the pattern. So she came round here in despair, and we found some linen again that went with her fabric. In fact, it looks really nice. So as her fabric was too narrow, what we did was add some linen to the center front pieces and the center back pieces, and then cut the whole thing out as it would have been before. In actual fact, it looks really nice. And then she used the same colour for the neckband and for a band around the sleeves. So I just wanted to say, don't despair. Sometimes coming up with a solution is actually much more interesting than the original one, although it might seem a bit tortured to get there. I'm really pleased with this, and in fact, I'm quite pleased it's a bit different to this one. This one, I deliberately didn't put anything along that seam because I like the way the colours go. But I have to admit, these two weft yarns shrunk slightly differently, so the edge was a little bit wobbly. So the ribbon hides all that. I don't worry about things like that anymore anyway. So I'm wearing this today. Perfect weather for it. It's 24 inches, I think, across. So it's not tight. Then when the side seams are done, the armhole is just turned in and stitched. So if I can, I will make an extra worksheet to go in with this pattern, so that, or I'll make it available or something, because I like the idea that you can use any of my patterns over and over again. So you can make lots of different versions of the same thing. You know it fits you. You've made your mock-up. Maybe sample your weaving first and wash it. But this is fun for me. I like finding solutions to things. I don't think I've ever actually had to completely give up on something. I never, ever cut it out, though, until I'm completely sure. Because once you've cut it out, you can't go back. Anyhow, I hope this has been a help somewhere. Have a lovely day. Bye now.